In the early 1600s, Lancashire was viewed as a rather lawless place, and it was viewed as a poor, backward, remote and problematic county, and caused deep anxiety for then King James I, who also viewed it as fertile ground for the devil himself, especially more so when there was an extraordinary discovery of witches. Hey everybody, Matt and
Danielle,
back with you. Welcome to the dark side of the moor. Hope you're doing okay. And today we're back in a forest. Can you believe it? Every week a forest for you. And this one is no exception. It's a beautiful spot. And we are in Pendle Forest, officially Aitken Wood. And you can't quite see it, but you'll have seen it right at the start of the video. The shadow of Pendle Hill, which of course is very famous for the story of the Pendle Witches. Now, I'm not insane, so I'm not going to climb up Pendle Hill today. We'll save that for another time. But we've come to look at the sculpture trail in the forest. There are many videos, documentaries, books, etc., all to do with the Pendle Witches. We're not going to go too much in depth into that story, but I will bring you kind of a brief history as we go, who they were, what happened, etc. So I hope that makes sense. So please don't watch this one thinking this is like a full analysis of the Pendle Witches. It's not. We're going to have a look around the forest, we'll find the sculptures, and we'll tell you the story. Ready?
Always.
Never readier. So, Alison Device, in March 1612, was a poor beggar woman, and it's said that she was begging in the woods near Pendle Hill, which just so happens to be where we are today. She was begging and asking for pins. One person who passed her while she was begging was a man called John Law. He was a peddler from Halifax, and he refused to help her. It wasn't too long after this that John Law suddenly collapsed. He was paralysed. It was like he'd had a stroke. But he was convinced that Alison had cursed him. So Alison was brought before a justice of the peace. And when she was there, she confessed that she used witchcraft to harm John Law. But at the same time, she also then started to accuse her own family of witchcraft. Not just her family, another family. Two families altogether. And they comprise of about 12 people in total. And these people are what became known as the Pendle Witches. The two families were the Device family, who lived at a tower nearby called Malkin Tower, and the Chattox family, and they all lived in this particular area. But after Alison had kind of said about their families dealing in witchcraft, all of them were arrested here in Pendle Forest. Now, the matriarchs of the family were quite old, possibly in the 70s at this point. And unbelievably, they were all marched to Lancaster Castle they were arrested and marched to Lancaster Castle, which is 50 miles away. So they had to walk 50 miles to their jail cell, essentially. But who were these witches? So the 12 of them were accused of quite a number of things. To remember it, I've written these down. They were accused of sorcery, murdering local people by witchcraft, causing bodily harm, causing madness using charms, curses and clay figures, and conspiring with the devil. Both matriarchs of the families were also accused of using familiars. Now, the familiar that the device mother used was said to be a big black dog, and through that, so basically it speaks the words of the devil. So that curse that John Law was possibly speaking about would have probably come from something like this. So, the families are the Chattocks and the Devices. They live here in Pendle Forest, and they are feuding, even though they do kind of the same thing. There's like little bits of witchcraft, etc. They're feuding families, they don't get on. Interestingly, they're also known by nicknames. Now, we've covered this before on other stories. When we go back hundreds of years, people just were known as nicknames. And so the matriarch of the Device family is Mother Demdike, Old Mother Demdike, and her daughter Squinting Lizzie, and the names go on like that. Now, I was trying to think, what would our names be if we were given nicknames like that? Can you think of anything good
in that day and age?
In that, if we were about 400 years ago, what could our nicknames be?
I mean, I'd be burned. I've got red hair.
Oh, this is true.
Red.
Yeah.
Red.
Red. Old Red. Perhaps I better figure my nickname out off camera.
Come back to that.
Okay, here we are. The witches being led from here to Lancaster Castle. And whilst they are awaiting trial, they're put in a dungeon at Lancaster Castle. And whether it was the walk or the kind of conditions they're being kept in, Old Mother Demdike passes away while she's being kept out of the dungeon and awaiting trial. However, the other families and a couple of other people as well, not just those, end up going to trial. Because they are feuding families, they don't help themselves really, because they kind of accuse each other of what they are being accused of. So that certainly doesn't help. But then there is one family member who completely throws a spanner in the works. So what sealed the fate of the witches at their trial was the testimony of 9-year-old Janet Device. She claimed that she had seen her family climbing onto the backs of ponies and riding them through the sky, almost like a stereotypical kind of, almost like a Disney kind of witch thing, isn't it? So she had actually said that at the trial, and that was enough for the judge. The accused families and everybody else were then found guilty, and they were marched to Gallows Hill in Lancaster and hung. And I think 10 of them were hung. Of the 12 who went to court, obviously Mother Demdike passed away there. One of them was found not guilty, and the other 10, which included men as well, who were females and males amongst them, were all hung. That was kind of the end of the Pendle Witches. In more recent times, there have been kind of calls to have them pardoned, because it was like, for want of a better word, it is a witch hunt. Obviously, that's where it came from. The 17th century was really full of this kind of superstition to do with witches. So it starts with things like the Pendle Witches, 1612. Also that same year, there are the Samlesbury Witches. They were also arrested and tried at the same time. By 1640, you have the infamous Witchfinder General Matthew Hopkins prowling the land and hunting down witches. That's when they started being kind of dunked in the water. You're a witch. If you drown, then you're not a witch, but it's already too late. If you are a witch, you'll float. Oh, horrendous times. And then, of course, there's the Salem witch trials at the end of the 17th century. What an incredibly difficult century to be a woman in. Probably every century is difficult to be a woman in. I don't think I can make that judgment call. However, kind of as the 1700s began, the witch trials ended. It was a much bigger thing in Europe. Thousands and thousands of people were accused in Europe. In the UK, 3,000 kind of is the estimate. It's unknown altogether. 3,000 people were executed. 2,500 of those were actually in Scotland. So England had about 500. But yeah, all wrongly accused, essentially. And the Pendle Witches were kind of just like healers. They were using medication, they were healing people. They were not these like black-hatted, green-faced witches that you see in films today. But it seems to be that now, 400 years later, is how we view them. Alice Nutter was from Rough Lee, and she was one of the people accused and hanged during the Pendle Witch Hunt. Unlike the others, though, she was from a wealthy and noble family. She was accused by Janet Device of witchcraft, and although she pleaded her innocence, she was found guilty and hanged. This statue commemorates Alice Nutter. Okay, now we're in Newchurch in Pendle. We're about a mile away from where we've just been, because this little church here, right next to us, is a 16th century church, and so it would have been here at the time of the witches. Now, what we believe is, of course, that all the witches, because they were found guilty of a crime, were not buried in consecrated ground or anything like that. However, there is a kind of folklore, if you like, that one of the witches is buried here, and certainly the family grave is here. So we'll have a little look around and see if we can find it. So it's not going to be easy to read today, but it is officially this one, and Alice Nutter was one of the people hung, and this is the Nutter tombstone, yet the letters are almost impossible to read. But the reason people immediately think of witches is because if you come further down, you can make out this image at the bottom, and there is a skull here, and people just go, oh, if there's a skull, then maybe there's devilry at work here. Yeah, it's interesting to see it. I very much doubt Alice is here. and I don't think the skull is actually connected to witchcraft. I think it's just these were on graves in the past. So yeah, actually if we look up there, Ellen Nutter, 1655, George Nutter, possibly also 65, Isabel, and yeah, a bit worn, but can't tell. Right, let's have a little look in the church whilst we're here. So when we think of the Pendle Witches today, we probably picture them as these kind of women creating mayhem and mischief on top of Pendle Hill here, causing, you know, devil worship and summoning the devil. And it was almost straight away people kind of thought that of them as well. And there is lots of images from the time, like sketches that show them kind of prancing around with the devil, which I think sounds like quite a good Friday night.
I agree.
But yeah, it was only because really of a book that then came out in 1614, and it was called The Extraordinary Discovery of Witches in Lancaster. And it basically went through the entire trial. It's somebody who was at the trial, and they wrote about it in depth. Because everything else, think about 400 years ago, things were not necessarily recorded, certainly things like trials. And so that's why we know the Pendle Witch story so well today. It's because it was written down and kept as a record and then released as a book 400 years ago, which is quite fascinating. But yeah, you know, so many centuries later we still talk about the witches, and we'll continue to probably for centuries more because of things like the beautiful forest behind us here and the rather stunning Pendle Hill. So I hope you've enjoyed this one, our little look through the sculpture trail. And yeah, sorry you'll occasionally had screaming kids in the background. There's school groups and all sorts here, but there we go, we'll leave it at that. So thanks for joining us. We will see you for more spooky tales this October. Take care. Bye for now.